X. Well, hello everybody, it's Dr. Drake 63 here today, and just going to briefly give you an overview of firearms philosophy. And a little bit unusual for me here. I don't have props. I'm not gonna hold a rifle or any of that. But I want to talk about today what what I view my three main purposes for owning firearms are. And this is kind of relative to discussions floating around out there about, well, hey man, the Second Amendment pertains to hunting, or no, it doesn't. It pertains to armed militias to repel tyrannical governments. And then you'll hear even other people with, different views. But I'm going to tell you what I use firearms for. I use firearms first and foremost. My first and foremost involvement with firearms was maybe to shoot loud dogs. But kidding aside, my first and foremost interest in firearms was as a kid growing up. Like a lot of guys of my generation, playing with GI Joes, playing with toy guns, things like that. We used to like to play Army, and I always thought that battle rifles were about the coolest thing. So that was kind of my entrance into what makes a cool firearm. Always specifically interested in like World War II kind of stuff. But that's what really got me into it. But in terms of using firearms, first and foremost, for me, they're for hunting. And specifically, I deer hunt. And every year, I try to get a couple deer. Typically, I'm shooting mule deer in Montana, but we do deer hunt in Minnesota as well for whitetails. And but I like to put meat in my freezer. Now, if you came into my house, you would not see any horns. You would not see any mounted animal parts or anything like that. I have nothing against it. I don't do it. But what I do is fill my freezers full of venison and eat. I do some bird hunting as well, but not a whole lot, and usually don't have a ton of success to do that properly. I think most of the time you need to have a good bird dog, as well as some decent land to hunt for birds. But without a question, venison's a real staple in our diet. We tend to eat it a couple times a week at our house. My wife grew up eating wild game, so it's no issue for her. And of course, the kids will eat it because they don't know the difference. So we could do a whole series on how to properly cook venison. I do love to cook, and so we make sure that whatever we're putting on the table has some effort and some thought put into it. But that's first and foremost. Secondly, and more of on a daily basis, I'm a concealed carry holder, and I am a big believer in my right to protect myself, to protect those that I'm with, and which is typically going to be my family. There's guys that won't go to the bathroom without their firearm. I'm not at that level. But when I leave the house, I typically do have a firearm on my person, or if I'm in a situation such as work where I can't always have a firearm on my person, I have one nearby. And some folks will say, well, hey, you might as well not even have one if it's in your briefcase or whatever. I disagree with that. Obviously, ideal for the quickest response is going to be having a firearm on your person. But most of us don't have that ability to do that all day long, and so you prepare for however you can. But that's my daily use for firearms. And third is for hobby, is for target shooting. And as you know from my videos, I like the black rifles quite a bit. I also like shooting hunting rifles for accuracy, and I also like shooting pistols as a hobby. So I go through thousands of rounds of ammo every year. I'm probably, if you look at the marketing term 80-20, 20% of the people are consuming 80% of the product. I'm most definitely in that 20% of guys that are consuming 80% of the ammo. I spend more money than I tend to comment on. But I enjoy shooting. I shoot almost every week, and oftentimes multiple times a week. And I think I pointed out in an earlier video last year that, hey, I'm not shooting my pistols enough. I need to be more proficient at that. And since saying that, I've really picked it up, and I've seen the results pay off. I'm shooting better than I was. So I really enjoy that kind of stuff. I enjoy the camaraderie of folks I talk to at the outdoor rifle range and things of that nature. And usually something that I brought with me is going to pique the interest of somebody else. I can't go anywhere with my Galil or with my SBRs or AKs or any of that stuff where somebody isn't saying, hey, what is that? And tell me about it. So I love doing that. So firearms, three main areas that I mentioned. Now, in terms of being prepared for a tyrannical government or repelling a tyrannical government, I'm going to be honest, I don't know what that looks like. I see an awful lot of guys get on Facebook and whatnot and talk about how they're willing to take up arms against anybody who would confiscate them and things of this nature. And you know, I'm not really going to state what I'm willing to do. I'm first and foremost responsible for taking care of my family, and getting involved in some kind of a shootout, outnumbered and outgunned by authorities, isn't really going to do much to take care of my family. Now, does that mean that I'm not willing to fight? No, that doesn't mean that at all. That means that I'm going to think twice, and that I'm not one of those guys that's looking for a fight. And I'll be honest, especially in like AR and AK pages, stuff like that, you do see a lot of the guys piping up that you almost think that they're looking forward to a day where they could be in some kind of armed situation. And I got to be honest, I'm thinking most of those guys probably don't know what death looks like. They don't know what broken bodies look like and things of that nature. Maybe some of them do, but I'm not one that's definitely not one that's looking for a fight. I like to get involved via the voting booth, via the political process, via supporting organizations like the NRA, other organizations I'm looking into supporting, such the Gun Owners of America and things of that nature, because you know, these folks are fighting hard to stand up for our rights. Now, are any of these organizations perfect? No, they're not. And they're not run perfectly, and they're not run by perfect people, but without those kind of organizations, we'd be in a lot of trouble. We left it up to the politicians. I don't think there's anything such as a truly pro-2A friendly politician anymore. If it comes to getting reelected and keeping their job versus sticking to their principles, I don't have a lot of confidence that politicians will do that. So I think what is known is, besides the fact that there's 5 or 6 million members of the NRA and maybe 1 million members or so of the GOA, you add it all up together, there's 100 million firearms owners, and we all have various degrees of what we believe the Second Amendment is and how far we should go to protect it. But I know in my case that I don't own firearms simply because I'm going to stand up to a tyrannical government. I don't own firearms simply for self-defense. I don't own firearms simply for sport and fun, and I don't own firearms simply for hunting. I own them for all of those reasons, and I'm sure you have yours as well. My main point is regardless of your particular reason for owning firearms, we need to stick together as a group, all 100 some odd million of us law-abiding firearms owners. We need to stick together, and we need to vote for our rights and continue to fight for our rights. And let's hope that doesn't ever involve a situation where people feel a need to get violent, where people feel a need to cause harm to other Americans, or where other Americans ever feel a need to infringe on our rights. That's the scary part, but I think at the end that we're all a reasonable group of people, and we should definitely keep clear heads and make sure that we're preserving this very important right, which sets us apart from so many other nations in this planet. This is Dr. Drake 63 saying thanks for watching, and remember, support the Second Amendment, support the National Rifle Association.